Hello and welcome to the second of Raw's General Election 2017 Manifesto Analysis videos. Today we're going to be looking through the Conservative Manifesto, and again I've reduced it down to 5 key points that we're going to analyse today to see whether we think that they will win the Tories the general election in 2017, as they look like they probably will. The 5 key pledges that we've taken are real term increases in NHS spending reaching £8 billion extra per year by 2022-2023. Those worth more than £100,000 are to pay for their own social care, which Jeremy Corbyn has called a tax on dementia. Scrap free school lunches for infants in England, but offer free breakfast across the primary years. Get rid of the tax lock, which means that national insurance and income tax might rise. Net migration to be cut below £100,000 people even per year. To join me in this analysis is Jonathan Mellor, our head of speech here at Raw. Jonny, what do you think, first of all, of the real term increases to NHS spending that will mean that extra £8 billion per year will be put into the NHS by 2022? Do you think that this is the kind of pledge that will win over some of the people that doubt Tory commitment to the NHS?
I think it will. I think it's in terms of like the statement itself, £8 billion, that's a lot of money, and people looking at that at face value will think, oh, they are serious about funding the NHS. I think the issue being, when you look in the details, that's over a 5-year period. We're looking at just over £1 billion extra a year. Well, if we paid the same amount, our population is increasing. In real terms, I think it's a nice statement. I think the majority of people who are on the fence will probably, if this was their issue, will think that Tories are serious about funding the NHS, but I don't think it's going to have a tangible impact if it is implemented.
The second key pledge in the Tory manifesto was those that are worth more than £100,000 will have to pay for their own social care. So this especially applies to pensioners who will, if they're worth more than £100,000, have to pay for their own care in old age. Jeremy Corbyn's called this a tax on dementia. Theresa May's defended this by saying that it's just asking those that are slightly better off in their older age to pay for the care rather than making younger people pay for it. Do you think it's a fair commitment to make, or do you think that this will sort of turn away some of the older voters that might otherwise vote Tory regularly? I
think this is actually quite a big deal, especially as you mentioned, these kind of more typical voters for this party. £100,000 like net worth isn't a huge amount. The average house price in the UK is around 200,000. You know, you split that between you and your spouse, but that's hitting quite a lot of people, and I think having that safety net no longer there, if your net worth is 100,000 and you're going to be retired for 20, 30 years potentially, you're not going to have that much money to support yourself. And I think that's going to, when people start thinking about that, that's going to make them reconsider the commitment to the elderly that the Tories are promising.
Now, the third key manifesto promise was to scrap free school lunches for infants and replace it with free school breakfasts for those in the primary years. Now, free school lunches was obviously something that was hugely popular. Do you think that scrapping it and replacing it with breakfast is a good idea? Because it is coming under criticism for saying that those parents that don't provide breakfast for their children are fundamentally failing as parents, and we are letting them get away with that through this policy. Do you think that that will put off a lot of traditional Tory voters, or do you think that this is a policy that will prove popular?
I don't think anything when it comes to children and scrapping things that you're already giving them is ever going to be popular necessarily. I don't think this will be the key point where people go, I'm voting Tory because they're cutting school lunches and replacing them with breakfast. I think this is going to be another similar to the last point, where it's going to affect quite a lot of people. And yet, if we look at the last point of the net worth and whether or not they receive funding, is this going to be implemented in the school meals? Because surely if you are of a certain wealth...
If you're from a family of wealth,
you don't need free school breakfasts. Yet there are clearly children in the nation who need school lunches because they're not being provided earlier. So I feel like it's just going to be undercutting some of the some members of society that are already feeling the pinch.
Now, one of the more controversial pledges in this manifesto is that made by Theresa May to get rid of the tax lock, and they haven't been making a big deal out of this because it's kind of like they've subtly gotten rid of this. But the tax lock was something put in place by George Osborne, who pledged that national insurance and income tax wouldn't rise under a Tory government. Theresa May's got rid of this pledge. Do you think that people are going to notice this a lot, and do you think that low taxes are one of the big reasons that people have been voting Tory, and will this turn them off a bit?
I think it will. I think there's argumentally a fundamental kind of betrayal in increasing tax under a Tory government, be seeing as their main kind of war cry against Labour is typically, oh no, they're raising taxes, increasing socialism. Well, if you're raising taxes and then proposing to increase funding on the NHS, I'm afraid that's doing what you've set out to stop. I think you're right in saying that a lot of voters are going to, if this gets more media attention, they're going to be thinking, actually, no, I don't want to pay more in taxes. That's why I've traditionally voted Conservative. And we could see a bit of a change there. I mean, Labour's obviously going to be, at some point, increasing a tax. That's not really a surprise. But if it's both sides are going to be doing that, or all parties, then you see a bit more of a sway away from Conservatives, potentially.
Now, the final policy then that I want to look at is the pledge to cut net migration to below 100,000. Now, this is something that will probably appeal to those that voted for Brexit that support the Tories, who might have voted to lower immigration when they voted for Brexit. Do you think this is a policy that will put off some of perhaps the pro-EU voters that might vote Tory?
Definitely. I feel like this policy is an appeasement of the right side of the party. This has been what the right and the new UKIP Conservative voters have been wanting. It's been their tangible number was 100,000. Get it into the tens of thousands, bring that back. But I think it will be popular with that side of the party. But I think a lot of moderates are going to be put off, especially those who are, I'd say, economically right wing, are going to be thinking, actually, maybe this isn't the best idea, and look to see if that's changed in the future. I can only see reducing immigration really harming the country.
Yeah. Now, obviously, we haven't been able to cover every single manifesto pledge in these videos. There simply isn't time. But I just want to do a quick conclusion with you then as to whether you think that this is a good manifesto for the Tory party. Theresa May yesterday said that this was a mainstream government for mainstream Britain. She seems to be placing herself in the centre ground almost, do you think, with this, especially with some of her other policies like the cap on energy prices. That seems to be something that would appease the centre more than her own sort of base.
I feel like that's true that she is now trying to go towards the centre, but this is only a result of the fact that she's already got the right. Yeah. It's solid. There's no real competition from UKIP. As UKIP have such in general a wide voter amount of voters throughout the country. Now that they're coming Tory, that's going to swing a lot of marginals. So she's not worried about the right. Now she's going for the centre, the Lib Dem voters, the economic right but socially liberal groups. And that's where the mainstream idea is coming from. Whether or not actually, supporting or saying mainstream yet choosing to kind of defund things that help non-mainstream people in the country, not the centrists. We'll see how that plays out.
And the other thing, the thing that's so interesting about this manifesto, and you sort of touched upon it there, is that she's not only pushing to the centre, but she does seem to be pushing to the right as well, with those net migration pledges and things like that, and this sort of the hard Brexit that the Tory party seems to be aiming for. There seems to be, and some people have commented on it already, a desire from Theresa May to create some sort of Tory Empire. She seems to be talking about government for the next 2 decades, and it does seem that at the moment the Tory party has been able to take such a large coalition of voters that does seem a likely reality. Do you think we're likely to see something like that? Do you think she's going to be successful?
There's potential, and I think that's a lot to do with how the opposition has responded in the last 2 years. But I think it's interesting to say, oh, there's a political party that's trying to take control for a long amount of time. Well, yes, that's the point. That's what they do. That's what they'd like to do. I don't think any political party goes, actually, I'd like to be in opposition for once. That's obviously the plan. The difference being is now the Conservatives are actually in a position to do so. Means it's a lot more likely. At least, all I can say, at least that she is going towards the centre in some ways. It's not she's not setting up this empire you mentioned in the far right.
Thank you very much for joining me, Jonny. If you want to look at some of our other analysis videos, we've got Labour Manifesto Analysis, as well as we're going to be doing analysis of all the other parties coming soon. Remember as well to check out on our YouTube channel interviews with candidates from the local constituencies if you're voting here at university, so that's Coventry South and Leamington and Warwickshire. So please do check those out. Those are on our YouTube. Thank you for watching.